Hello and welcome to another episode of Liberation Hour Radio. We're on 102.7 FM in Kitchener-Waterloo and also live on Facebook and YouTube, as well as streaming at radiowaterloo.ca. And it's an absolute pleasure to be here with Joanne McArthur today. Joanne is an award-winning photojournalist and the founder of We Animals. She's been documenting the plight of animals on all 7 continents for over a decade. She's the author of 2 books, We Animals in 2014 and Captive in 2017. And she was the subject of Canadian filmmaker Liz Marshall's acclaimed documentary, The Ghost in Our Machine. Joanne is based in Toronto, Canada, and travels 6 to 8 months a year to document the stories of animals around the world. Welcome, Joanne.
Thank you for speaking with me today. It's going to be fun.
Hope so. So you normally travel 6 to 8 months a year. How's the travel going this year for you, Jo?
Good question. Yeah, I'll be traveling less this year, and in a way it feels like a bit of the break that I have not been able to take for a very long time. I do have an adventurous spirit, but now I get to be home and just do a little bit more relaxing. Mind you, I am working on a big new book, so work continues, but I get to be home a bit more. It's nice, actually.
Oh, that's cool. Wow, it only seems like 2 years ago that I was a giddy new activist getting you to sign a copy of my book, the famous Joanne McArthur. And now 2 years later, I'm a radio show host that nobody's still heard of, interviewing the famous Joanne McArthur. It's an amazing transition for me.
Oh, no.
It's an absolute honor. So thanks for being with us. Can you tell us a little bit about your new book, Hidden, and how it's different to some of the other things you've done?
Yeah, this new book is called Hidden Animals in the Anthropocene, and the Anthropocene is the proposed name for the current geologic era. And anthro means human, and scene is the era. And so now we are a geologic force. We are affecting the climate, we are affecting all animals on Earth. And so this is called the Anthropocene. And this is a book that is not just my work, it is the work of about 30 photographers. And there are many photojournalists and documentarians who are doing really strong work now about animals and our uses and abuses of animals. And I wanted to compile this into a historical tome of a book. It's a really big book. It's 9 by 12 in size. It's 5 pounds. It really is a monumental document of what is and what should never again be.
Wow. And when does it come out?
It goes to print in Italy September 7th. And we're currently fundraising for it, which is great. I've crowdfunded all of my books. With this one, we have We Animals Media has a lot of supporters, and I knew we'd reach our goal of 65,000, but I didn't realize that we would reach $65,000 in 3.5 days. It's a very difficult and painful book, and so I did worry that it would be tough to promote it and get support for it, but people seem to realize that this is a very necessary book, especially right now, while the pandemic is highlighting that our use of animals just absolutely needs to end.
So yeah, the quote that I saw in the book was that this book is a historical document, a memorial and an indictment of what is and should never again be. That's quite powerful words.
Thank you. I had a lot of time to think about it, and the book was inspired by the conflict photographer James Noctway. He made a book a long time ago called Inferno, and this is a huge book, and it's an indictment about how we treat one another. And he documented genocide and famine and civil war and all this for decades. And I saw that book and the seriousness of it, the weight of it, and I knew that I wanted to do something similar, but for animals. And to highlight the conflict we have with animals, but also to change the dialogue about conflict photography. Conflict photography is, considered the human realm, but of course there's great conflict between us and the environment and us and all other animals. So yeah, we aim for this book to be a game changer in terms of the conversation and visibility of these stories and many things.
Can't wait to get my hands on a copy. So the Anthropocene, the the age of the domination of man over the planet. What do you think's wrong with animal activists? Why can't we just enjoy it? This is our time, surely. Is there something fundamentally wrong with us, Joe?
Yeah, there's a really long laundry list of what's wrong with us. But yeah, joking aside, I mean, now really is the time for us to, to highlight. Well, I mean, it's always time for us to highlight these stories. We've caused about a million gazillion problems for others, and yeah. But I mean, the pandemic is speaking loudly, as you say. It is, big red arrows towards what we're doing wrong and what needs to change. Are we going to learn from it? That's, back to you. Are we going to learn from this?
I mean, I hope so. I think we all hope so. It seems like it's one of those trigger moments. If humans can't wake up now and see that these issues are directly causing our own demise, even the selfish ones should get it, you would think. But so we just got to stay hopeful and try to take advantage of the situation. So a lot of the work you do is obviously behind the camera with your lens. What's that like? What made you first pick up a camera? What's your backstory to being an amazing photographer?
Well, I come from a family of artists, and I can't even draw a stick man. So, and yet I have that artistic desire to create. But, really, I'm a storyteller. I think that's what it comes down to. And I get that from my family members as well. I like to put things into visual bite sizes. And that's how I understand the world. And I love creating in that way. And so it really started with the love of street photography, the Magnum photographers, the war photographers, and how they were also capturing history and shaping history. That really appealed to me. And let's see. Yeah, I just became really insatiable with the camera. It was always in hand. And it was a way, how do I put this? It was like an all access pass for me into the lives of others. If you're walking around with a camera, for me, that gave me the opportunity to document people and things and then say, hey, who are you? You looked amazing there, or you seem so interesting. What's your story? So being a collector of stories, the camera was a good tool for that.
Yeah, you may be familiar that I do some astrophotography. You've probably heard of some of my work of capturing stars. In fact, no, you haven't heard of me at all. Nobody's heard of me, but that's fine. I like camera work as well.
That's like almost the opposite of what I do. We're using the same tool, and yet you are, photographing the vastness, far away galaxies, and like time is completely different for you than it is for me. Time is like the minutia of right now between humans and all the things we're doing.
Well, it's funny because I actually bought my long zoom lenses for astrophotography, but that was shortly before I became an activist. So now they're mainly trained on slaughterhouses, and I don't get out to look at the stars much at all anymore. But they'll still be there once we get this pesky animal agriculture thing cancelled.
They will. I'm curious to know how you're using your long lenses when you shoot animal rights work.
At a lot of different vigils and gathering research and intel, and just kind of long shots. You go to a vigil, seeing pigs being unloaded at a distance, or chickens.
Yeah.
So you can get a lot of places. There was the slaughterhouse in Conestoga, which is in Kitchener, had an employee lunchroom above where they unloaded the pigs with a television screen that showed the numbers that were killed from the previous shift to motivate the workers, I guess, as they were eating their lunch. But I don't think they realized that with a 600mm zoom lens, I could read the numbers off of it. So we took some pictures, and they moved the television screen the next week. So stuff like that. It just gives you a much closer viewpoint.
Oh, that's so interesting and different from how I work as well. With my, history of street photography and that kind of thing, I've always wanted to get close and right into the action, so to speak. And so my favorite lenses are actually my 17-35 and my 15mm. Yeah, getting really into the thick of things. I think I'm better at that than the long lens stuff.
Okay, yeah, I wouldn't sound very good. I did have a nice 50mm, but my daughter started doing wedding photography and took it, and I've never seen it since. So maybe I'll get it back one day.
Well, you and I can work together. It'd be very complimentary, wouldn't it?
That would be great. Yeah, I would be honored. So the new book, it's a collaboration of 30 photographers. One of them, I'm sorry if I mess up the name, Christo Murima.
Murima, yes.
Murima, okay, Murima. So her quote was, breaking the law is not a question of having no choice, but rather one where I do what is necessary to help the animals. Is that how you feel as well?
That's how I feel, and that's how a lot of us feel. Actually, Christo is quite an incredible person. He's one of the early investigators, and a lot of us learned from him. A lot of the European investigators were trained by him because he was out there doing it long before we were. So it's really an honor to include his work in our book. And yeah, and it's true. I mean, I don't like breaking the law. I don't know if any of us like breaking the law, but for me, my duty, my loyalty is to the animals and to these stories. There should be no laws prohibiting us from getting on these properties. I'm not saying we should be able to access them at any time, but we should be able to knock on the door and get a tour, because people should see where their food comes from, how animals are treated. Visibility and seeing is part of the solution to this big problem. And so we need a lot more of that. And that's also why it's really an honor to be featuring all these photographers. They work so hard. They put themselves at tremendous risk, legal risk, psychological, emotional risk, in order to bring these images to the public so that some of us and more of us actually do see.
Cool. So yeah, speaking of laws, what about the new one, the Bill 156 in Ontario? It's going to really limit photojournalism and investigative reporting. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I have a lot of thoughts on that, but it really is disheartening that it's going to be such a waste of our time to have to fight it, because we should just be fighting directly, for the animals and not for our rights to document their stories. And so it's just, industry with money, the money that, they have to protect themselves. And it shouldn't be happening at all. I'm sure that the law will be repealed or overturned eventually, and it could take a really long time. It saddens me greatly, but I will say that, these laws come and go, and we can do this kind of work all over the world. We can do it next door. We can do it while covering our footsteps a lot more carefully as well. If we want to document an industry, for example, we don't have to out that particular farm. These industries look alike around the globe. I have seen chicken farms in Sweden, Australia, and Canada, and you name it, and they are the exact same system. So for me, I am pointing out a system that needs to be taken down, not a particular farm. I'm not saying that there isn't good reason to take down particular farms. There is as well. But if we aren't showing the exact place, then there's more security for us as investigators.
Interesting. How are you on the scale of excitement of sneaking into these places? I understand you may have snuck into some, more than a few over the years. Some people describe it as being like almost like a drug. Others, like me, are terrified, and there's people in between. But all of us are doing it for the reasons of standing up for the animals. Where are you on that scale?
That's actually a good question, and it's true that really adventurous people, risk takers, are more into this kind of work. And I am quite a risk taker, and I love a lot of movement and adventure and like high stakes and all of that. And so I am suited to the work. However, I cannot ever recall an investigation, and I have spent years of my life doing them, where I have been there and wanted to go in. You know that you're going in, you're risking getting beaten, jailed. A lot of my activist friends now who do investigations work have been put in jail, have been beaten, have had extreme injuries, baseball bats, concussions, like terrible things have happened to them. And so the risk is not fun. The risk is, for me, it's always scary and extremely unpleasant. For me, I always have to fight the fight or flight when I'm in these places. When you're in a situation of danger, everything in your body is telling you, like, leave, go, 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 go. And I find it really exhausting to not only spend 10 minutes, but to spend like 6 hours. You know, I remember the very first time I went into a pig farm that was in Sweden, and you know, there was just suffering as far as the eye could see, and the filth and the smell, and my eyes were burning from the ammonia. And I took about, you know, I was there for 10 or 20 minutes, and I said, okay, guys, I've got it. Let's go. And they were like, you know, they were seasoned, I wasn't. And they said, no, no, we're here all night. And I thought, there's no way I can spend all night here. I can't spend another minute here, let alone all night. But we must have spent about 4 hours. And it's like that every time. And I can't wait to go. I'm always very happy and relieved when I've left safely. And then I'm even more relieved when I get to download those images onto my hard drive and then back them up and, you know, make sure that they're safe, because that's the only reason for going there, really.
Yeah, no, that's powerful sentiment. So I think you scared a few people there, and I mean, the truth is you've been in a lot of places, and you haven't got caught. Have you had any close calls? Probably had a few close calls over the years.
Lots of close calls, but I take a lot of precautions, and my teams, whoever I'm working with in whichever country, we take these things very seriously, because we're not going to be effective if we're in jail or if we're recovering from, you know, baseball bat beating for 6 months and the psychological effects. Like, I don't blame anyone who gets beaten up and then doesn't want to go back. So, I mean, we have to be very, very careful. We have a security team, we have a car, we have a security team outside. We all have walkie-talkies in our ears, and we use a basic code of, you know, red, yellow, and green. That's how I do it with my team. And with the piece in my ear, I expect to hear a green from the outside at least every 10 minutes. Yellow means pack your bags and get ready to go, something's changed. And a red is, of course, an emergency, and flee immediately. And I've had all of those situations, and it's very, very unpleasant. I'm sure it's unpleasant for the people who own the properties as well. I mean, they think we're burglars. Maybe they think we're there to like harm them, you know, and yet we don't want to be there. We're just doing this because we have this profound need to save animals, help the lives of animals. Yeah, I hate it.
I think what you said is you know, really important, that it's all love based, and we really would prefer not to have to do it. That we should be able to get a tour of these places. They should be proud of, you know, of what they're doing, if they could be.
Yeah,
but yeah, money changes things quickly. So I think we'll take a short break there, and then when we come back from the break, we'll hear some more from the amazing Joanne McArthur. Thanks.
Thank you.
Welcome back to Liberation Hour Radio on 102.7 FM in Kitchener-Waterloo, Facebook, YouTube, and streaming at radiowaterloo.ca. We're here with the amazing and talented Joanne McArthur, who is going to honor us with a small reading out of her book, Captive, from 2014.
This particular excerpt was written by Laurie Gruen, a philosopher who graced this book with her words. Imagine you can fly through water. Really try to imagine the joy you experience sharing that thrill with friends. Imagine yourself laughing and playing as you move with great speed, rolling and weaving, both above and below the surface. Now imagine that you can fly through the air, over land and sea. Revel in the familiarity of this journey, since it's something you, your partner, and others in your community do every year. You lead the whole flock great distances as the seasons change, and you feel that this is your primary purpose in life, getting yourself and your friends to safety. Next, imagine yourself not at all interested in traversing great territories with others. Instead, you really like to be alone, mostly in a dark, quiet place within the earth, the dampness and musk calming every nerve. If you are able to feel even just a little bit of what these non-human experiences are like, you get a glimmer of what is lost in captivity.
Wow, thanks for sharing that, Joanne. That's it's one of my favorite pieces out of the Captive book. It's always stuck with me. We actually adapted it for a meditation in London here about a year ago, and it was really powerful to the group to hear that. We just changed a couple of little pieces in it. Sorry about that, but it's just so beautiful. I think it really ties into the idea of how we empathize. You know, that the social justice movement that we're involved in is different to others in that we're not the victims. The victims largely don't speak for themselves. So we have to empathize. We have to really put ourselves in their place. And that quote really stuck with me, of really getting down to the grassroots of imagining what another's life might be like. That you just want to be left alone. You're just used to doing this thing that you do in the deep, dark earth, and you have no idea why anybody would want to bother you. So thanks for those words.
Oh, I didn't know that you guys had adapted it for that purpose, and that's just beautiful. I'll make sure to pass that on to Lori.
Yeah, we probably could have asked for permission, but it was a pretty small group and we didn't make any money out of it. So
Not at all.
It's okay with Lori.
Not at all. And yeah, we should reimagine ourselves as others, or just imagine ourselves as others and what their experience might be like. I mean, we have no idea their sensory experiences, and they are so much more talented than we can imagine. A lot of animals. I mean, pigs can smell truffle mushrooms many feet below the earth, and you know, owls can see great distances at night, and all these things. And I think we should just live in a state of absolute reverence for animals and their abilities, and just the fact that they are here as well. And I wish we lived in a world that was not anthropocentric, and that, you know, we felt that everyone had the right to be here, because they do. Everyone has the right to be here, not just us.
Totally agree, 1,000,000%. You know, if we measure intelligence by human standards, it's kind of an unfair fight. I couldn't tell the difference between poisonous and non-poisonous food, and especially with the pounds I'm putting on during this COVID thing, I won't be flying under my own power anytime soon. So I have total respect and reverence for the skills of non-humans. But thanks for putting that in perspective. You've taken an awful lot of photos over the years. I understand some of them are available for use by activists. Can you tell us something about your archive?
Yeah, I'm so excited you asked about that. I think it's the best and most useful thing that we provide for the animal advocacy movement and for the media. And so, yeah, tremendous number of images over the years, and we've narrowed them down. And as a result, we have over 10,000 really strong images that are available for free to anyone helping animals. The media can purchase them, and they do. But the archive is growing as well. It has lots of video now by our filmmaker, Kelly Guerin, and it's searchable by keyword. So, you know, you can type in gorilla Africa or pig Spain, rattlesnake USA, you know, whatever you're looking for, and use those images for your animal advocacy. And it's great to see journalists using them, and politicians, policymakers, and NGOs, and we're really proud of that. And the more we bring on contributors to We Animals Media, the more images we'll have available. And actually, that ties in, the archive ties into We Animals Media. So my project was We Animals, and that was the name of the first book. But my goal is always to amplify what I can do and the stories of animals. And so I conceived of We Animals Media, so making this project into a global media agency, telling the stories of animals, and not so much the wildlife, because wildlife aren't quite represented by conservation photographers. And so it's these billions of other animals who, you know, are unseen and unheard, and they are our focus.
Thank you. So that's weanimalsarchive.org. Is that still the link?
Yeah, that's the one. And then the website, the media agency, is weanimalsmedia.org.
Okay. Yeah, I actually found that early on in my activism, and I rewrote a Queen song and recorded it with a bunch of images of pigs just before we went down to North Carolina. We tried to shut down the Tar Heel plant, Rise Up, Shut It Down. Um, I made the song so incredibly sad and chose the worst pictures that I think I've got at least 50 or 60 views on YouTube over 2 years. So I've learned that people don't necessarily want to be that sad, but there are some amazing pictures in there. I'm really thankful that they're available to the community.
Yeah, and speaking of that, it's interesting how we have to choose to use sad images, and we know that it's an uphill battle for us. So people innately don't want to look at cruelty because it's upsetting. People don't want to be upset. They aren't drawn to it for the most part, unless you're me. I'm always drawn to those things so that I can see, like with that famous Tolstoy quote, if you see someone suffering, come closer and don't turn away and do your best to help. But most of us don't have that ethos, we're not brought up that way. And so we don't want to look at images of sadness and cruelty, but we also, it's a double whammy. We don't want to face our complicity in that cruelty. And so people are just going to find every really quick reason to close the door on those images and looking at them. And so, yeah, we have to make the images beautiful in their way. We have to make them compelling and poignant. We have to use them in the exact right way. And honestly, I don't have the key. I wish that I had the key to knowing exactly how to do that, because things would be moving a lot faster. So, we Animals Media, we're a work in progress as well. We put various images of degrees of different kinds of cruelty out there, and we see what lands and what doesn't, but you also never know. We have people write to us and say, I saw one of your images 10 years ago and I've been vegan since then. And you just never know. And but we're trying our best.
Yeah, it's a difficult thing, being one of the people that wants to be a witness and to get in there and share that witness. The root of the word witness is wit or knowledge, and that's so important to share these things. People just wouldn't know. It's the whole industry wants it just hidden away, and so thank you for sharing.
And you're welcome. Thank you. But people are afraid to witness because of how they will feel, but we don't have an awful lot of experience with trying that out and seeing how it feels. And what people don't realize is that that feeling can, engender feelings of, empowerment. We might feel empowered to do something with the problems that we're seeing. We might be empowered to create change and be a part of the change, and those things feel really good. Which also comes back to veganism. I'm a vegan because I saw what we do to animals and it's completely unnecessary, and so I removed myself from participating in animal cruelty as much as I could, and that feels good. It's not a deprivation, right? Like people are like, oh, what does she eat? Like, gosh, I eat everything, I'm fine. And it's a joy. It's not a deprivation, but we don't know that. We're very, very focused on avoiding harm, but like we just need to evolve our concept of what all of that is and what deprivation is. It's not a deprivation, it's a change, it's an enlightenment. And I wish for more people to experience those things.
Yeah, I wish we had the answer to that, to what exactly to show people. I wish everybody wanted to experience that more. But one thing that's been consistent for me is people always say once they've gone vegan or gone activist that they wish they'd known earlier. It was 49 years of munching on everybody that came into my path, and I honestly don't think I ever walked away from listening to somebody. It's just I just never had the experience of running into somebody. So I wish we could broadcast your pictures and your stories from billboards and television sets across the world. But until then, I think it's just commendable that you're out there doing that stuff. But thank you.
Thank you. And more of those images are getting out into the world. It's really exciting to see the number of people and NGOs using our archive every day, especially during COVID, because our images are showing, those wet markets and live animal markets and factory farming. So we have a lot of use of our images right now, and we have our images more and more on billboards as well, and on TV and in film. So it feels really good. We work really hard. The team and I work really hard, but progress is being made. Slow steps, but nevertheless, I do choose to focus on the momentum and focus on the good.
Yeah, no, thank you for doing that. This is the time. Like I said before, this is a trigger moment, and if people, some people will say it's too soon to talk about this. Let's just focus on, getting through it. But there can't be any better time to talk about the origins of this thing. I've often, in my darkest fantasies, fantasized about some kind of virus that would, affect meat eaters. But we seem to have got caught up in it as well, tragically. That was exciting for a period. This thing is horrible, but hopefully the world can take a pause and think about what it's doing, and we'll come out the other side better. Fingers crossed.
Yes.
Can we talk about travel a little bit, because you found a way to blend travel with your photography, and I love to travel. I did a lot of travel in the years before I became an activist. You've been to many places, many hotspots, all 7 continents. One of the most recent trips, I think, was the Australian bushfires, which perhaps you didn't get to see all the iconic Australian tourist spots. Must have been quite an experience. Can you tell us a little bit about that trip?
Yeah, that was a flight that I purchased in the morning, and I got on the flight in the evening. Things were developing quickly, and yeah, the team and I made the decision to just get me there for 2 weeks. I'm half Australian, so I have seen all of the sites. And so I didn't need to do any tourism. I had 36 hours to see my family, but never mind that. I mean, the point was to go and tell the story of animals. We could see that the koalas and the kangaroos were being documented quite heavily, but what about the domestic animals? And this is always the question for We Animals Media. What about them? They remain invisible. And we heard stories that they were, being burned, that they were being euthanized, and so that's why I went primarily. And I saw lots of terrible things and heard lots of terrible stories. Animals like cows and bulls that they tried to protect them, but yet, fires burn along grass very quickly, and then the animals are burned, and rather than giving them the vet care that would surely have saved their lives because they had minor burns, they just sent them to slaughter. So a lot, like hundreds of thousands of animals went to slaughter instead of being treated for smoke inhalation and burns and that kind of thing. And it was hard to document those stories. It was easier to document the wildlife because they were just more apparent. You drive around and you see them. But yeah, the domestic animals are so often hidden.
Wow, that must have been quite the experience. And I didn't know you were half Australian, so you may know that I came from New Zealand originally, and usually don't get along. So by head and shoulders, you are the most empathetic Australian that I've met in my life so far. So I'll forgive you for that.
We should be having a fist fight right now, but we're getting along really well.
Well, that's the problem with this isolation. The fist fighting is only going to hurt our phones. So we'll just have to agree to disagree on a few things, sporting wise. But whereabouts in Australia were you from? Did one of your parents was Australian then, but you were born in Canada, or?
Yeah, my
dad's
Australian. And
okay.
So, the family are Essendon fans, but I'm sorry that I just don't follow. I just don't follow it, and I'm ashamed to my Australian name.
No, that's quite all right. Not everybody likes cricket, and I quite understand. Do you have any happy stories out of the Australia trip, or any happy story of an animal that was saved along the way, something to pick up my spirits?
Yeah, you can see my face right now. You made this sort of, as you can see, you can see me searching for the happy stories. Well, it was really dire, and very few animals were rescued. And seeing the rescues illuminated just how bad it was. Like we would pull over to a eucalyptus plantation, and there'd be a bunch of koalas in one tree, and you'd spend hours getting a few of them down, and they would go off for treatment, and they would eventually be rewilded. But a lot of the land is uninhabitable now, and when I was there, it was 2 and 3 and 4 weeks into it. So I'm sorry. I know I have like happier stories for other animals, but I will say in Australia it was very depressing. And these fires, a lot of these fires can can be managed by us, cannot be started by us. Cigarettes flicked out the window. Climate change is causing more fires, it's causing more floods worldwide as well. So yeah, again, these things come back to us, not 100%, but a lot of it. And this pandemic as well. I don't know how much more Mother Earth can do to show us. You know, she's literally setting us on fire and flooding us and sending the plague. And what more is it going to take for us to change our habits? We need to fly less. We need to use our car less. We need renewable resources. We need to not eat animals. We can do all these things. We have the capacity to change it. We are smart and innovative. And even in this pandemic, we're seeing how quickly we can adjust to this new life. And you know, it's on us. And I'm not the praying kind, but nevertheless, I pray that we will learn and change. We have to. We can. We really can.
I think that's really well said. It's a really important point. We never would have thought they could have found trillions of dollars out of the back pocket to suddenly support the stock market. You know, here we are. It just shows what is possible. Imagine a world where, you know, we cataloged our resources and applied them to the things that they should be applied to instead of the ridiculous things. But I guess if you're hopeful, I'll be hopeful. So I hope we can change our ways. We have to keep trying.
Well, you know, I am hopeful, but that was a decision, and that's practice. So hopeful is not just, you know, there's something that happened to me. I can't remember who said that first, but hope is something you do. And I had to train myself to do that and to focus on putting one foot in front of the other, focus on all the wonderful people in my international community who are doing good things for animals and creating change and progress. So hope is something I do.
Okay. Well, maybe we'll just take another short break there with those hopeful words, and we'll come back in a minute for the rest of our time with Joanne McArthur. Thanks for being with us.
Wonderful.
So welcome back to Liberation Hour Radio on 102.7 FM in Kitchener-Waterloo, live on Facebook and YouTube, and also streaming at radiowaterloo.ca. We're here again still with Joanne McArthur, and happy to ask more questions here. First of all, Joanne is going to read us a quote from her book Captive, something that she feels strongly about, and I look forward to that. Take it away, Joanne.
Thank you. This is the final text from the book Captive. Like all animals, we wish for autonomy. We wish to be with our own and to explore our world. We flee from harm and we seek shelter. We desire to build our lives and make our own way. We hate forced confinement and we succumb to despair if we have no prospect of freedom. I'm not an ethologist or a psychic. I have no special insight into the souls of animals, and yet I see what I see and I record it with my camera, and I know that I'm not alone. If you worry that you're being tricked into an anthropomorphism that you don't agree with, then I simply ask you to look again. Do we really think the despondency and desperation we observe are not real? Do we really believe that the paw reaching through the bars or the defeated body sprawled on the concrete floor offer no insight into what these beings are experiencing? Where else do those primary emotions come from, if not from our mutual experience as vulnerable animals, subject to the joys and suffering of a body that lives and dies? The zoos I visited and have depicted in Captive are not immutable or inevitable. They are human constructs for human pleasures that belonged to an age when we knew little to nothing or cared about the inner lives of other species. As the field of ethology continues to gain its footing in the scientific discourse about sentience and welfare, it will become inevitable that compassionate choices are the only path forward. We can encourage zoos to conserve species in the wild. We can provide more resources for improved habitats for rescued animals who would not survive in the wild. We can choose to close down all unaccredited and poorly run institutions. There are a lot of things we can do. And of this I am certain. Places of exploitation, domination, and objectification have no place in an enlightened society. They can become sanctuaries, wildlife centers, and places for compassionate conservation. It's time for us to be courageous and build a relationship between we animals and those animals based on respect and care. It's time to evolve and leave captivity behind.
Wow, thank you. Thank you for that. That's really powerful.
Thank you. Some people are probably wondering, hey, she didn't say close all zoos. And the reason I don't say close all zoos, to elaborate a little bit here, is that these are multi-million-dollar facilities that can be used as rewilding facilities. For example, at the Toronto Zoo a number of years ago, I documented their conservation efforts for the black-footed ferret, which is going extinct in our western provinces. And so they're breeding those animals and rewilding them. And that's a good thing. So we can use these institutions for animals who need help and for programs that help and that are in the service of animals.
That's a really good point. Really good point. But yeah, close the zoos, but reopen them as something useful, please.
Yeah.
Stop charging tickets.
Yeah, I mean, the world is meant to evolve. We are meant to evolve. There's no reason for us to continue doing things that we have learned don't serve ourselves and serve others. More to the point, culture is often the de facto reason for us doing something, tradition and culture. But like by definitions, those things evolve, and so we need to evolve away from the tradition of bullfighting and rodeos and the traditions of eating turkey at Thanksgiving and all these ridiculous things that are just human-made concepts.
Yeah.
Rant over.
Yeah, no, it's a good rant. It's something I think we all feel. Earlier on, I asked how you became a photographer. What made you first pick up a camera? I guess I'd like to ask what made you go vegan? What made you become an activist?
Yeah. Well, my mom lived out in the countryside, and she had 2 dogs, a cat, and a bunch of chickens. And these were hens who roamed around the property and had a really nice life. And I got to know them, and they would sit on my shoulder and they'd sit on my lap, and they enjoyed that. And I got to know them, and I had never had the opportunity to get to know the personality of chickens before. And I saw that they were just like the dogs and the cats, like they had quirks, they considered their actions, they had friends, they had fights. And I was like, oh, they're really smart, and I just didn't know. That's why humane education is so important. I mean, education about others should be, like full on, along with arts and maths and sciences in school, grade 1, let's do this, right? Because we will treat others a whole lot better if we understand their complexities. And so with these chickens, chicken was my favorite food. It was my barbecue chicken was my favorite food until I got to know chickens. I was like, okay, I just can't anymore. And I did imagine that I would feel deprived, but there was no way I was going to continue eating essentially these animals who had become my friends. And that's what tipped me into investigating animal sentience. And that was a long time ago. It was in 1998. And I started getting PETA pamphlets, and that's what we did back then. And, not much internet happening there. And so I got educated by, people for ethical treatment of animals. And then I was like, oh, I have to stop eating all animals. I became a pescatarian, and I didn't realize that, we were harming, that eating cheese and eating dairy and eggs caused harm. And but I was really passionate about animal rights at that point, and I wanted to do an internship at Farm Sanctuary. And they say, well, when you are interning with us on the property, you have to be vegan. You have to practice veganism out of respect for the animals. And I thought, well, that's extreme. Vegans are extreme. And I'm just going to do it because I want to do the internship. But when I get back home, I'll go back to being a vegetarian. But after day one of 24 hours of being vegan, I had the experience of not harming anyone. And I was, learning about how cruel it is to take calves away from, dairy mothers and all this. And after 24 hours of being vegan, I was like, okay, this seems really extreme, but I'm never going back. And that was 17 years ago. And I thought it would be a struggle, but I adapted to my world, and my family and friends adapted to me very, very quickly. And as I said earlier, it became a joy and a point of pride to try and live in a world with as little as harm, without doing as little harm as possible.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that story. That's 17 years is a good stretch of time, but it's so easy, Obviously, it's not hard to live a vegan lifestyle. It's and the community is wonderful, and I really like the part about the animals, the non-humans' personalities. The chickens do have personalities. Obvious. We actually had an activist pig here in my apartment for a couple of weeks 2 years ago, and the Piggly Wiggly was great. Like, I loved. I used to take him up and down on the elevator, wrapped in a blanket like a baby, and so nobody would ask about him because it might have been a slight violation of the lease. But Piggly Wiggly was great. Put him on a little harness and took him around different actions until he expressed it as started to express the needs to go back to his family. So it was a fairly short tenure, but it was pretty interesting. And yeah, he had such a personality. The cat didn't like him much. Mikey the cat was really not a big fan. But I converted from my pre-vegan years. I had a roasting pan, one of those tinfoil ones that was converted into a litter box, and I don't think he ever really saw the irony, which is probably a good thing. But
right.
He was very clean, very, very personable, and very much loved. So thank you for sharing your vegan backstory.
I like that you said that this pig let you guys know when they were done with whatever they were doing. Just as we when we're done with something, we leave, and or we speak up. And animals do speak up to us. It's that we don't listen, or we can't imagine, or we don't want to imagine that their actions and their voices could possibly be similar to ours, but they really are. And that's not anthropomorphism, that's just science. We know so much now.
Mm-hmm.
And we know if a dog is behaving and cowering in fear, it's because the dog is experiencing fear. And it just goes on and on. Yeah.
Just somehow never thought about it that way before the switch turned, that they have needs and wants just like we do. And it's hard to see them sometimes, but yeah. So how can we support you and your team better? How can we get our hands on this wonderful new book of yours? What can we do to find out more about what Joanne McArthur does?
Thank you. Well, the We Animals Media has a really awesome business model. As you know, we wanted to give everything away for free because our goal is to help animals. And so that does not equal a successful business model unless you become donor supported, which is what we did. And so we are supported by monthly donors and by grants. And that's how we're able to volunteer and give everything away and do what we do. And so that's one way of supporting us. And also this new book, we are aiming to get as many out into the world as possible. And our goal is to sell 1,000 books in our crowdfunding right now. And so on Indiegogo, you can just Google Hidden by We Animals, and that will come up. And we love for people to purchase this book and get those books out into the world.
Wonderful, wonderful. Can't wait to see that book get released. Is there any other thing you'd like to share? Any other comments or that you'd like to share?
Yeah, you mentioned the archive earlier, and I really do want people to know that it's a great resource for people, students, activists, policymakers, you name it. There are images that will help you do your work and do your campaigning. And again, it's free. And so I encourage people to go to weanimalsarchive.org and use those images and to share those images, or with other people who might need them. So spread the word on that one.
Okay, thanks for sharing that, and thank you to you and your whole team for all the things that you do. Obviously, we have a big budget, and we'd normally have a gift basket to give you, but with the isolation, I'm just going to eat the contents of it myself. I apologize for that, but it's been an absolute pleasure. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show, and I'm a really big fan, as we all are here, and hope you keep doing what you're doing for a long time to come.
Keep doing what you're doing as well. Thank you so much, and you're just such a big part in spreading the word and about animals and how things need to change. So thank you so much.
Okay, thanks, Joanne. Have a great night. Take care.
Take care.